The night it began, the city felt unusually still, the kind of stillness that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. Rain pattered softly against my window, tapping like fingers too impatient to wait. I had been sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the glow of the television without really watching, when the envelope slid beneath my door. At first, I thought it was a mistake. No one ever wrote to me, not anymore. But there it was, an unmarked, heavy envelope, the kind that carried more weight than just paper. I picked it up, and the second I felt the texture thick, old, almost brittle, I knew this wasn't junk mail. My name wasn't on it. No return address. Just a seal of black wax, pressed with an unfamiliar insignia. My stomach tightened as I broke it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten, careful strokes, steady, deliberate. Your sister's death was not an accident. If you want the truth, follow the trail. Start where it ended, Blackwood Bridge. I read it again and again. My hands trembled, though the words were simple enough. My sister, Emily, had died 3 years ago. The official story: she lost control of her car late at night, swerved off Blackwood Bridge, and drowned before help could arrive. The police had closed the case within weeks. A tragic accident. Everyone had accepted it. Everyone but me. I remembered the funeral, the closed casket, the hushed condolences, the whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. People said she had been drinking. People said she was reckless. People said I should let it go. But Emily wasn't reckless. She was careful, deliberate. She never drank when she drove. She never crossed that bridge at night unless she had to. And yet, they told me it was just an accident. Now, 3 years later, this letter appeared out of nowhere. I stared at the words until they burned into my mind. Start where it ended, Blackwood Bridge. Questions swarmed like hornets. Who sent this? Why now? Why me? And why wait 3 years to tell me what I had always suspected in the darkest corners of my mind? I wanted to dismiss it, call it a cruel joke. But the truth was, part of me had been waiting for this, for confirmation that my instincts weren't just grief-twisting reality. I set the letter down, poured a glass of whiskey, and tried to steady my hands. But the glass rattled against the table. My mind was racing. If what the letter said was true, then someone had lied. The police, her friends, maybe even people in my own family. Someone knew more about that night than they ever admitted. And if there was a lie, there was a reason. That's when the anger came back. The same rage that had burned inside me at her funeral. The same rage I buried under the weight of silence and time. It clawed its way to the surface, hot and sharp. I wasn't going to ignore this. So I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd return to Blackwood Bridge, the place where her life had ended, and maybe where the truth had been buried. As I folded the letter back into the envelope, I noticed something I had missed before. On the back corner, barely visible, was a smudge of red ink, wax, or blood. The storm outside grew louder, as though the city itself was warning me. But it was too late. I had opened the door to the past, and there was no closing it again. The drive to Blackwood Bridge felt longer than it should have, even though the highway was nearly empty. My old sedan rattled with every bump, the wipers squeaking across the glass as a drizzle turned into a steady rain. The road ahead blurred, smeared by reflections of streetlights, like the past bleeding into the present. I hadn't been back to the bridge since that night. I avoided it deliberately, always taking the long way around, convincing myself it was just easier. But the truth was, I couldn't stomach the sight of it. Not the twisted guardrails, not the dark water below, not the ghosts waiting in the silence. When I finally pulled over, the engine ticked as it cooled, leaving me alone with the hiss of rain on asphalt. I stepped out, my boots sinking into the wet gravel, and there it was, Blackwood Bridge, the place where everything had ended. The structure stretched out before me, an old iron skeleton spanning the river, its beams rusted, its surface slick. The guardrail on the far side still bore the scars, the bent metal, the section that had been replaced after her car broke through. Seeing it again sent a sharp ache through my chest. I walked slowly across, every step echoing in my ears. The rain made the river below swell, dark and restless, the same river that had swallowed Emily's car. I stopped near the middle, my hand brushing the cold railing, and tried to picture it, her headlights cutting through the night, her tires screeching, the crash, the plunge. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Emily hated this bridge. She told me once it gave her chills, the way the iron groaned in the wind, the way the river always looked bottomless. She avoided it whenever she could. So why was she here that night? Why take this route at all? The police report had claimed she was alone, but the image that haunted me most was her last phone call to me. Just hours before, she'd sounded nervous, off, like she wanted to say something but didn't. "I'll tell you later," she said. "When I'm sure." When she's sure of what? The rain hit harder, soaking through my jacket, but I stayed put, gripping the railing tighter. I could almost hear her voice in the wind. I could almost see the fear she must have felt in those final seconds. Then my eyes caught something. Near the edge of the bridge, just below the replacement section of the railing, there was a faint marking. At first, I thought it was just rust. But as I leaned closer, I realized it was deliberate, a small carved symbol, worn by weather but still visible. A circle with a slash through it. Not random, not natural. I touched it with my finger, the edges rough against my skin. My heart pounded. Someone had left this here. The letter's words echoed in my head. Start where it ended. And for the first time in 3 years, I knew. This wasn't just grief. This wasn't just suspicion. Someone had been here that night. Someone who wanted me to know. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the river below, and for a moment I swore I saw something glint beneath the water's surface. Something metallic. Emily's car had been pulled from the river, they told me. But what if they hadn't taken everything? What if something was left behind, something they didn't want me to find? The rain poured harder, but I didn't move. My knuckles whitened on the railing as the truth began to take shape. Jagged and cruel. Emily's death wasn't just an accident. It was a message, and I had just started to read it. The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air when I stumbled out of Daniel's apartment. My hands were trembling, my ears ringing with the echo of that single shot. Daniel was dead, executed right in front of me, and I knew if I had stayed a second longer in that window's line of fire, I would have been lying beside him, blood soaking into the carpet. The streets outside were empty, silent. Whoever pulled the trigger had vanished into the night like a ghost. No car engines, no running footsteps, just darkness swallowing every trace. I didn't call the police. I couldn't, not yet. If I told them what happened, they'd twist it, maybe even pin Daniel's death on me. And the diary, Emily's diary, was my only lifeline to the truth. So instead, I ran. Back in my apartment, I bolted the door and poured myself a glass of water. Though my hands shook too badly to hold it steady, I stared at the diary again, her words now heavier, more urgent than ever. If something happens to me, don't trust anyone. I barely had time to breathe before my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something deep inside told me not to. I answered at first. There was only silence. Then, a distorted voice crackled through the line. "You're in over your head, Michael." My blood turned cold. "Who is this?" "I'm the only reason you're still alive," the voice said. "Walk away. Forget Emily. If you keep digging, you'll end up just like Daniel." I gripped the phone tighter, anger pushing past my fear. "You think a threat will stop me? You killed my sister. You ruined everything." "I'm not walking away." A pause. Then, almost like a whisper, "Your sister wasn't who you think she was." The line went dead. For a long time, I just sat there, phone still in my hand, the weight of those words sinking into me like poison. Not who I think she was. Emily. The sister I grew up with. The one who raised me after our parents died. Who sacrificed so much to give me a chance at a better life. What could he possibly mean? I opened the diary again, this time flipping through every page, desperate for a clue. And then I found it. Tucked between 2 entries was a folded note, separate from the rest. Different paper, different handwriting. It read, "Meet me where it all began. Midnight. Alone." No signature. Just those words. My mind spun. Where it all began. Then it hit me. The old lake house. The one our parents had taken us to every summer as kids. Abandoned now, rotting with age. But still standing. I checked the clock. 11:32 p.m. If I left now, I make it just in time. My gut screamed it was a trap. But my heart, my need for answers pushed me forward. Because if Emily had secrets, I needed to know. And if someone thought they could scare me off, they were about to learn the truth. They weren't the only one who could play this game. The drive out to the lake felt endless. The road stretching on like a black ribbon swallowed by the night. My headlights cut through the mist, but every shadow felt alive. Every bend in the road felt like it was hiding someone waiting to strike. By the time I pulled up to the old lake house, my knuckles were white around the steering wheel. The place hadn't changed much since we were kids peeling paint. Broken shutters swaying in the wind. The dock jutting out into the dark water like a finger pointing into the unknown. It was the kind of place you remembered fondly in daylight. But at midnight, it looked haunted. I checked my watch. 12:04 a.m. I was late. The air was thick with silence as I stepped onto the porch, every board creaking under my weight. I half expected the door to be locked, but when I turned the handle, it gave way with a groan. Inside, the air was heavy with mildew and dust. The faint glow of moonlight seeped through the broken windows, illuminating cobwebs and rotting furniture. My footsteps echoed as I moved through the house, every sense screaming at me that I wasn't alone. And then I heard it, a floorboard groaning above me. Someone was upstairs. I crept up the staircase, each step protesting under my weight. My pulse thundered in my ears as I reached the landing. The hallway stretched out, lined with doors, our old bedrooms, the bathroom, the storage closet. Memories tugged at me, but I forced them down. The second door on the right was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. She was there, a figure standing by the window, silhouetted by the moonlight. At first, I thought it was Emily. My breath caught in my throat, heart leaping with impossible hope. But when she turned, I realized my mistake. A woman, yes, but older, with sharp features and eyes that glinted with something between fear and defiance. "You came," she said softly. My grip tightened around Emily's diary. "Who are you?" She hesitated, studying me like she was weighing whether to tell the truth. Finally, she said, "My name is Claire. I was Emily's friend." The word felt too small, too careful. "What do you want from me?" I asked, voice low, wary. "I don't want anything," she whispered. "I want to give you the truth. But you need to know it won't be easy to hear. Your sister wasn't the person you thought she was." The same words the distorted voice had told me. Anger surged in me. "Don't you dare. Don't you stand there and try to tarnish her memory. She was my sister. She was good." Claire shook her head, her eyes filled with something that looked like sorrow. "She was many things. But good? Not always. She was digging into something dangerous because she wasn't just curious. She was involved. She crossed people who don't forgive. That's why she died. And if you keep digging, you'll die too." I stepped closer, my voice a growl. "Then tell me their names. Tell me who killed her." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she'd refuse. Then, finally, she said one name, Marcus Vance. The sound of it made my blood run cold. A name I recognized, not because I knew him personally, but because I'd heard whispers. A man tied to everything from drug trafficking to contract killings. A name people didn't say out loud unless they wanted to disappear. Claire moved closer, her hand trembling as she touched the diary. "If you want to survive, burn this. Walk away. Forget Emily's crusade. Nothing you do will bring her back." But I couldn't. I looked into Claire's eyes and said the words I knew would seal my fate. "I'm not walking away. Not until Marcus Vance pays." Claire's expression darkened. "Then God help you, Michael. Because once you start down this path, there's no coming back." And deep inside, I knew she was right. But I also knew there was no turning back. Not for me. Not anymore. The marking on the bridge stayed burned into my mind as I drove back into the city. I should have gone home, dried off, tried to make sense of things in daylight. But instead, my steering wheel turned on its own, carrying me toward the one place I had avoided almost as much as the bridge itself, Emily's old apartment. She'd lived in a small, Two-story brick building on the edge of downtown. The kind of place that looked cozy from the outside, but was always too quiet inside. After her death, the landlord boxed up her belongings and handed them to me. I had shoved most of it into storage, unable or unwilling to sift through the memories. But now, with the letter in my pocket and the symbol fresh in my mind, I knew I had to look again. The storage unit smelled of dust and forgotten lives. I unlocked the metal door, the fluorescent light buzzing above me, and stared at the stack of boxes marked with her name. For a moment, my hands hesitated. Opening them felt like reopening a wound I had never let heal. But grief had turned to anger now, and anger is a sharper blade than sorrow. I tore open the first box. Clothes, books, little things that still smelled faintly of her perfume. Another box, photographs, mementos, movie tickets. My throat tightened at the sight of her smile frozen in those pictures. Then, in the third box, beneath a pile of worn sweaters, I found it. A leather-bound notebook. Small, black, the kind Emily always carried with her for sketching or jotting down ideas. But this one was different. The edges were frayed, the cover scratched, as if it had been handled constantly, hidden away, protected. I flipped it open. A T first. The pages were filled with random notes, drawings of places, fragments of conversations, half-written poems. But then the tone shifted. The handwriting grew tight, sharper, more urgent. I know they're watching me. The bridge isn't safe. If something happens, it won't be an accident. My blood ran cold as I read the words. She knew. She had felt it, lived with it, written it down, knowing maybe one day would find it. Page after page was filled with warnings, with cryptic sentences that painted a picture of paranoia and fear. He said he'd take everything from me if I didn't stay quiet. The circle, always the circle. Trust no one, not even him. I froze at that last line. Not even him. Who did she mean? I flipped further, my hands shaking. Near the back of the diary, taped to one of the pages, was a folded piece of paper. My heart pounded as I peeled it free and unfolded it. It was a receipt from a gas station, dated the night she died. Time stamped 11:37 p.m., just 20 minutes before the crash. The location? Not near her apartment, not near her work. It was across town, close to the bridge. She hadn't just been driving randomly that night. She'd gone out of her way to meet someone. The receipt had a note scrawled on the back, almost too faint to read. But when I tilted it toward the light, the words emerged. Don't trust Daniel. Daniel. My mind spun. He was her ex-boyfriend, the one she'd broken up with just a month before she died. I hadn't thought about him in years. Back then, I dismissed him as a bitter memory, a part of her life she'd left behind. But now, my jaw clenched as I held the diary tighter. Emily had been scared. She'd known she was in danger, and she had pointed me toward the man who might have put her in that car, on that bridge, in that river. The pieces were beginning to fit, slowly, painfully. And one truth began to burn hotter than the rest. If Daniel was involved, I wasn't going to the police. No, I was going to him, and he was going to tell me everything. The name burned in my mind like fire. Daniel Carter. It had been years since I'd seen him, but I remembered the way he used to look at Emily, as if he owned her, as if she was something he could control. Back then, she'd brushed off my concerns, saying I was being protective, paranoid even. But I had seen that cold glint in his eyes, the kind that doesn't vanish after a breakup. Now, with Emily's diary in my hands, his name scrawled in her desperate handwriting, I knew exactly where I had to go. Finding him wasn't difficult. A quick search pulled up his current address, an aging apartment complex on the east side of the city, not far from where he used to work. The kind of place where the blinds are always drawn and neighbors pretend not to notice what happens behind thin walls. I waited until nightfall. The anger in me was pulsing too strong to risk daylight confrontation. The shadows would be my cover, the rage my fuel. The hallway reeked of stale beer and cigarettes as I made my way to his door. Apartment 3B. I stood there for a moment, fists clenched, heart hammering so loud I swore he could hear it through the walls. Then I knocked. The sound of footsteps, the creak of a lock, and there he was. Daniel, His face had aged, but that arrogance hadn't left him. His eyes flicked over me, narrowing, calculating. Well, if it isn't Emily's little brother. His voice dripped with condescension. Didn't expect you at my door after all these years. I stepped forward, crowding him back into his apartment. We need to talk, he smirked, but I saw the flicker of unease in his posture as I shoved past him. The place was a mess: beer bottles, dirty clothes, unpaid bills scattered on the counter. A life unraveling. Still holding a grudge? He asked, shutting the door behind us. She broke up with me, not the other way around. Thought you would have figured that out by now. I pulled the diary from my jacket and tossed it onto his table. The leather slapped against the wood, opening to the pages filled with Emily's frantic scrawl. His smirk faltered. You want to explain why her last words were a warning not to trust you? I demanded. He froze. Just for a second, but it was enough. The silence that followed stretched too long, his eyes darting from the diary to me, his fingers twitching as if fighting the urge to grab a cigarette, or maybe a weapon. Finally, he laughed. But it was hollow, forced. You really think I had something to do with that? She was paranoid, losing her mind, writing garbage in those little notebooks of hers. She wrote that if something happened, it wouldn't be an accident, I snapped. And she was right. That crash wasn't random. She met someone that night. She met you. His eyes hardened. Careful with those accusations. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the cheap whiskey on his breath. Careful? Daniel, I don't care about careful. I care about the truth. And if you don't give it to me, I'll find it another way. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across his face. I didn't kill her, he said quickly, his voice low now, defensive. But I knew something was going to happen. She was asking too many questions. About things she shouldn't have. My stomach tightened. What things? He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, she was digging into money that wasn't hers. Old debts. People who don't like their names spoken out loud. The bridge wasn't an accident, but I swear I didn't push her there. I told her to stop. She wouldn't listen. I grabbed him by the collar, slamming him back against the wall. Who are you talking about? Who wanted her dead? His lips trembled. He tried to speak, but before he could, his eyes darted toward the window. For a split second, I thought he was stalling. Then I heard it, a sound outside. The faint crunch of footsteps. I turned my head just as the glass shattered inward. A gunshot thundered through the apartment. Daniel crumpled to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. His final breath escaped in a wet gasp. His eyes stared at me, wide with shock. Before the light left them completely, I dove to the ground, heart racing, glass raining around me. By the time I looked back at the window, the shooter was gone, just a shadow slipping into the night. But one thing was clear. Daniel hadn't been lying. Emily's death was no accident. And whoever wanted her gone was willing to kill again to keep their secrets buried. The drive back from the lake house was a blur. Claire's words echoed in my head, over and over, louder than the hum of the engine, louder than my own heartbeat. Marcus Vance. The name felt like a curse. I had heard it whispered before in back alley bars, in news reports that never quite gave the full story. A man who existed in the shadows, untouchable, powerful. He wasn't the type you stumbled across by accident. If Emily had crossed him, then her fate had been sealed long before that crash on the bridge. But why? What had she uncovered that tied her to a man like him? And why had she left clues behind, as if she knew I'd one day have to finish what she started? By the time I reached my apartment, the city was still cloaked in darkness. I locked the door, drew the blinds, and sat at the kitchen table with Emily's diary open before me. I flipped back through the entries, reading more carefully this time. Scrawled words, fragmented sentences, half thoughts written in a hurry, like she knew time was slipping through her fingers. One phrase stood out now that hadn't before. The fire wasn't an accident. I frowned, tracing the ink with my finger. Fire? I dug deeper, cross-referencing dates and notes. That's when it clicked. 2 months before her death, there had been a warehouse fire in the industrial district. It was all over the news, millions in damages. No arrests. no suspects. But there had been rumors. Insurance fraud. Illegal shipments lost in the blaze. And some whispered that Marcus Vance had been behind it. Emily had written about the fire 3 times in her diary, each entry more frantic than the last. The final one read, "He knows I saw him there. He knows." My blood ran cold. Emily had seen Marcus Vance with her own eyes. That meant she hadn't just been chasing rumors. She had proof. Proof that could destroy him. And now she was dead. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, a storm of rage and dread building in my chest. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. "You should have listened. Now, it's too late." Attached was a photo of me, taken tonight, standing at the lake house. My car in the background. Someone had been watching. I dropped the phone, my breath coming fast, the room spinning around me. Whoever this was, they weren't just threatening me. They were tracking me, every step, every move. And the only way to stop it was to go straight into the fire Emily had left behind. Marcus Vance, her killer, my target. I didn't care how dangerous he was. I didn't care if it cost me everything. This wasn't just about answers anymore. This was war. The warehouse fire had been written off as just another tragedy in a city full of them. The official report claimed it was faulty wiring, a freak accident that destroyed everything inside. But Emily knew better, and now, so did I. By dawn, I was parked outside the charred remains of the warehouse. The police tape was long gone, the media had moved on, and what was left was nothing more than a blackened skeleton of steel beams and crumbling walls. The air still carried a faint burnt smell, even after months. As I stepped inside, shards of glass crunched beneath my boots. I scanned the ruins, trying to see what Emily might have seen. That's when I noticed the cameras, not functioning ones, burned husks mounted high on the corners of the building. But if the fire hadn't destroyed the footage before it reached storage, then maybe, just maybe, there was still a digital trail somewhere. I pulled out my phone, snapping photos of the burned-out cameras, the layout of the place. Then, as I moved deeper inside, I found something that made my stomach twist. On one of the steel support beams, hidden low near the floor, was a carving. Small, almost invisible, but fresh enough to stand out against the ash. It was a single word. Run. I froze, scanning the shadows. The warehouse was silent, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Emily had been here. She'd carved that word as a warning, or maybe a last message, and if she'd left it, then she must have been close to something big. I didn't get much time to think, because as I crouched to take a closer look, a sound cut through the silence, the low rumble of an engine. I spun around just as black headlights flared through the cracks in the wall. A van screeched to a stop outside the warehouse, its doors already sliding open. 2 men in masks spilled out, armed, moving fast. They weren't here to talk. I bolted deeper into the warehouse, weaving between crumbling walls and rusted beams. Gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks echoing like thunder. Bullets ricocheted off metal, showering sparks into the dark. My lungs burned as I sprinted. The exit on the far side, my only hope. One of the masked men shouted, his voice rough and commanding, "Don't kill him. Vance wants him alive." The words chilled me. They knew who I was. They knew exactly why I was here. But I wasn't about to let Marcus Vance's men drag me into whatever fate Emily had suffered. As I neared the back door, I spotted a rusted fire extinguisher on the wall. With one desperate move, I ripped it free, spun, and hurled it into the path of my pursuers. The extinguisher hit the ground hard, bursting into a cloud of white powder that filled the air like smoke. Coughing, blinded, they fired wildly as I shoved the door open and stumbled into the sunlight. I didn't stop running until my car was in sight, and as I peeled away from the warehouse, tires screeching, one thought seared itself into my mind. If Marcus Vance wanted me alive, it wasn't mercy. It was because I had something he wanted, Emily's diary, and I'd die before I let him take it. By the time I made it back to my apartment, I was drenched in sweat, my heart still hammering from the chase at the warehouse. I locked every door, checked every window, and still couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me. Marcus Vance's men had orders not to kill me. That meant only one thing: he wanted what Emily had left behind. The diary. I sat at the table, flipping it open again, this time searching not for words but for patterns. Emily had been smarter than me. If she knew she was being hunted, she wouldn't just leave her secrets in plain ink. And that's when I saw it. Tiny indentations on one of the blank pages, like faint scars left behind by a heavy hand pressing too hard with a pen. Invisible unless you tilted the paper against the light. I rubbed a pencil lightly over the page, letting the graphite reveal the marks. Slowly, a message appeared. Coordinates. I punched them into my phone. They pointed to an abandoned storage unit on the outskirts of the city. It made sense. Emily wouldn't keep proof in her apartment where anyone could find it. She would have hidden it somewhere anonymous, somewhere only I could find with the clues she left behind. But if I could figure it out, so could Marcus. That night, sleep didn't come. I sat by the window, staring at the street below. Every passing car, every stranger walking by it, all felt like a threat. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another message from the blocked number. This time, no words, just another photo of me, sitting by the window. The shot had been taken from across the street. I dropped the phone, rushing to the blinds. My eyes darted through the shadows, but whoever had taken it was already gone. The trap wasn't just tightening, it was closing. I knew I had only two choices. Run, leave the city, abandon the diary, pretend Emily's death was an accident, and let her killers go free. Fight, follow the coordinates, uncover the truth, and bring Marcus Vance down, even if it cost me my life. I thought about the blood on the bridge, the way Emily's handwriting shook on her final pages, the words she carved into steel run, but I couldn't. Not now. Not ever. The only way out was through. So I grabbed my coat, slipped the diary into my bag, and prepared myself. Tomorrow, I'd go to that storage unit, and I knew, deep down, that once I opened whatever Emily had hidden inside, there would be no turning back. The storage facility was the kind of place people used to bury their pasts: rusted padlocks, flickering fluorescent lights, and a silence heavy enough to crush you. It was just after dawn when I pulled up, the city still waking, the air thick with the promise of rain. The coordinates led me to Unit 46. The lock was old, corroded, but it opened with the key Emily had left taped to the inside cover of her diary. Inside, dust floated in thin beams of light, breaking through the cracks in the metal walls. Boxes stacked high, some collapsing, old furniture covered in sheets. At first glance, it looked like any other forgotten unit, but Emily hadn't died for furniture. I dug through the boxes, my hands shaking, and then I found it. A metal case, heavy, locked with a combination. I almost laughed. It was the kind of thing you saw in movies. But Emily had always been cautious, always 2 steps ahead. On the inside cover of the diary, hidden in the spine, I'd noticed a string of numbers earlier. 0412. Her birthday. I spun the dial, heart pounding. The lock clicked open. Inside was a flash drive, wrapped in layers of duct tape. I slipped it into my laptop right there on the dusty floor. The screen lit up with dozens of files, photos, documents, videos, and in every single one, the name Marcus Vance appeared again and again. Money laundering, drug shipments, payments to politicians, bribes, kill orders. Enough evidence to bring his empire crashing down. My chest tightened as I realized what Emily had been carrying. She hadn't just stumbled onto a secret, she had been holding a loaded gun aimed straight at Marcus Vance's empire, and it got her killed. Among the files was a video. My finger hovered over the mouse before I finally clicked it. Emily's face filled the screen. Her eyes were tired, her voice shaking, but there was steel in her tone. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it out. I couldn't let him keep winning, Michael. I couldn't just stay quiet. Vance has ruined too many lives, taken too much. If he comes for me, promise me one thing. You won't let him bury this. You won't let him bury me. My throat closed, tears burning my eyes. Her voice was like a knife twisting in my chest. The video ended. Silence filled the unit, and then I heard it. A slow clap. I spun around. Marcus Vance stood in the doorway. Tall, sharp suit, cold smile. Two armed men flanking him. "I was wondering when you'd find it," he said, stepping inside like he owned the place. His voice was smooth, calculated. "Your sister was clever, but clever only delays the inevitable." My blood boiled. "You killed her." He tilted his head, almost amused. "She made choices. Dangerous ones. Choices that left you standing in front of me, holding something you don't understand. Give me the drive, Michael. Walk away. I'll even let you live." I looked down at the flash drive in my hand. The proof. Emily's last message. And for the first time since this began, I felt no fear, only fire. I slipped the drive into my pocket and met his gaze. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You don't get to bury her. Not this time." His smile faded. He gave a small nod to his men. The guns came up, the rest was chaos. I don't remember every detail, just flashes. The gunfire deafening in the enclosed space. The smell of cordite filling the air. The pain of glass slicing my arm as I dove behind a crate. But I do remember one thing clearly. The look on Marcus Vance's face when I turned his empire against him. Because I didn't just run. I uploaded the files. Every last one. To the police, to the press, to anyone with an inbox. By the time Vance realized what had happened, it was too late. Sirens wailed in the distance. His men panicked. And Marcus, the untouchable Marcus Vance, finally looked afraid. That night, I sat in my apartment, bruised, bleeding, but alive. The city outside was buzzing with the news. Crime boss exposed. Empire collapses. Marcus Vance in custody. Emily's face wasn't on the headlines. But I knew she had won, and I had kept my promise. For the first time since her death, I let myself breathe. But deep inside, one truth lingered. When you stare into the dark long enough, it never really lets you go. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.